if you're kind of mohawkish, if it was upright, erect, you would look like the sun.
Yeah, that used to happen. And remember our caricature, our Simpsons caricature that Dale Hendrickson created for us. That was back when I did have the full-on mohawk. And it's from the side, and it's very Simpsonized, so it's very pointy. So it does look like the sun shines.
Kind of sunny.
So maybe I should do that again.
Yeah. Not just because of the hair, but your disposition. I worked with a girl whose name actually was Sunshine, and she was...
Oh, that's obnoxious.
...very happy and cheery. She was very cool. I like Sunshine.
All right. Well, I'm not changing my name to Sunshine. You can call me Sunshine today, but...
All right, Sunshine. So...
Well, I haven't had enough coffee yet for me to truly be my Sunshine self, but...
look at me.
I'll get there.
Although you did bring us presents from Comic-Con.
Yes. Not as many
awesome.
presents as I'd hoped, but, when you're bringing a bunch of crap back from San Diego, it was really hard to get suitcases closed, too. But I did what I could, buddy.
Yeah, well, we'll talk more about you in a little bit.
I don't want to talk about me. Let's talk about you.
Tough. No. But first, let me talk about our guest.
Yes.
Our guest is David Paris, and this is exciting. I was figuring we'll do some updates here. And some people have been asking about some of the things that we talk about periodically and getting some updates. And this is on the Space Warp Project. And so this is exciting because this guy is an adjunct professor at the University of Nebraska. He has now a team of people working on this project where they essentially believe that they have unlocked the secret behind space warp. So they even, at this point, we talked to him before when he told us about this, and he talked about lasers and measuring the effect on photons. But now they have built an engine and feel that they've measured an effect on a physical object, so we'll talk more about that. But how exciting would it be if Open Minds broke the news of the first warp engine?
It would be so awesome.
That would be
so
fitting
awesome.
Of our mega awesomeness.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is cool. So we're going to talk to him more about this, like these, he's built a plane, essentially, a space plane. That's kind of their model. They hope to have it like the first warp UAV where they fly it around. And, we'll talk about where he is and some really cool stuff.
Excellent.
But I wanted to talk to you next before we get into the interview and before we get into the news, because I wanted to ask, you went to didn't you go to the Unsealed panel at Comic-Con?
Yes, I did.
You were like a VIP.
I was pretty important.
Representing Open Minds.
I don't know if I was very important, but I was pretty important.
Yeah, pretty important person. PPP.
Yes.
How was it? Did they talk UFOs?
I will talk about that when we get to the news.
Oh, dun, dun, dun.
Teaser.
Well, there's more big news because we got to let people know today is Jason's last day in the office. However, it doesn't mean it's his last day on the radio show because we'll be Skyping it. So luckily, why don't we tell people this is breaking news? Nobody's heard this news yet. Right?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, some people have. Our loyal followers have seen it here and there online.
Mm.
But, yes.
So where are you going?
Tomorrow morning I'm hopping in the car and making the drive to Boise, Idaho. My wife and I are relocating there, but I will still continue to be part of the wonderful Open Minds family. And if you hadn't told them, Alejandro, they would be none the wiser. We could probably have fooled them that you and I were sitting in the same room.
Yeah, but, this is in the spirit of full disclosure.
Spirit of full disclosure.
Mm-hmm. Plus, it's a mission of love for you.
A mission of love.
You're doing it, like the Blues Brothers, because you're doing it for your wife.
Well, I don't know if then it's a mission. I think it's an obligation of love.
Obligation. Yeah, that's probably more accurate. So, and if people are wondering, why did he say Boise so weird? Because it's Boise. What the hell did he say? It's actually, we say it wrong everywhere else. I guess they say it Boise.
Yep, Boise.
Kinda
Gotta say the C.
Boise.
Yeah, Boise. They'll correct you if you say it wrong.
Well, cool. We're going to miss you in the office, but luckily we'll be talking to you every day still.
Every day, and, I think you'll see me popping in the office here and there. I do get around.
Yeah, you do. You're a traveler.
Yep.
Always been one and always will be, huh?
That's right.
Traveling's fun now.
It is.
Been doing a lot more lately. And
I enjoy it. It's exhausting, but I like it.
It is, yeah. All right, so with that bit of business out of the way, we've gotten talking about Jason out of the way. It's always one of my favorite parts of the show, and we'll continue that.
But now
going forward.
Made me tear up, and I don't know if I can continue.
Oh, you can do it, buddy. You can do it, because what's going to cheer you up is talking about news.
Yes.
UFO news in particular.
Yes.
Let's talk some news. You got some news for me?
All right. Well, as we already teased, I'm going to talk about the Unexplained Files. Many of you are probably aware of this show on the Science Channel that debuted last season. And they explore all sorts of mysteries, all sorts of unknowns, all sorts of unexplained things, which include extraterrestrials and UFOs. And they announced they're returning with the second season. And our friend and buddy and friend of the show, Chuck Zukowski, was featured on the show last season. And as he did last year, this year he returned on a panel at San Diego Comic-Con to discuss this show and announce the second season. So they teased a little bit of what is coming up in the second season of The Unexplained Files. And the little bit of a clip from a story from Chuck Zukowski that they showed the audience was about Chuck's theory that he's been talking about for a while now, related to this 37-degree latitude line that he calls the paranormal highway or paranormal superhighway. Mm-hmm. It's a line that runs across the pretty much the 37th parallel, where it seems there's a concentration of unusual activity, which includes animal mutilations, which includes UFO sightings. So pretty fascinating stuff. So it was good to see Chuck there, and in Chuck fashion, he brought lots of props. He's got his full vest with cameras and all sorts of flashlights and interesting stuff. And he was a little hot and sweaty too, looking sexy as ever. But whoa, it was really, really warm, and millions of people there, almost literally. And there's Chuck lugging around his big vest and looking like a Secret Service person. Not Secret Service, but Special Forces, more like it.
Yeah.
But
Special Paranormal Forces.
That's right. So that was cool. They, like I said, they deal with other paranormal stuff. So they were talking about a Chupacabra investigation that they do on the show. And then looking more into ghostly poltergeist activity. And then the highlight, I guess, of that particular panel was looking into the true story of the movie The Exorcist. And they had the star of that show, that 70s movie, Linda Blair, was there on the panel. So one of the more interesting questions came from an audience member about whether she experienced any paranormal activity during the filming of that movie. And she said, sorry, no.
Yeah.
She said other people, things happen like they do on every set, like fires and stuff, and people thought that ghosts were trying to burn down the set, or demons were trying to burn down the set, but she didn't get that at all. And she even mentioned that, they say young people, children, seem to have a better sense of things when things aren't right, when something, out of whack is going on. She said, I didn't feel anything. Felt a little cold, but that's because I'm sitting in my little nightgown thing all the time.
Yeah.
But the coolest part was because she was sitting next to Chuck, and of course Chuck was flirting with her. And
that Chuck.
Mr. Funny Guy Chuck was sitting on this little cheesy joke for a while, but he pulled this out. He pretended to fumble a little bit, and then he said, I'm sorry, I'm just sitting next to the great Linda Blair here, and she's so beautiful, and she's just so beautiful, she makes my head spin. Hi-oh! So
he's the king of the cheesy jokes, but that's a pretty good one.
Yeah, he pulled that one out. That was great. But she was sitting next to Chuck, and when she disappointed people by saying that she didn't think any sort of demon activity was happening on the set or any paranormal activity, she did say that she very much believes in extraterrestrial life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she said, the usual response that, space is so vast and she doesn't think there's any way we could be the only ones. But then she said, I definitely believe in that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
And I love Linda. She's a vegan and an animal lover.
Oh,
she
she
has
is.
her own animal foundation and stuff. So she's a great person.
That is
But it was cool to hear her talk
awesome.
about her thoughts on extraterrestrial life.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the Unexplained Files returns on Tuesday, July 29th. That's tomorrow. So if you get the Science Channel, check it out.
All right. Cool. So that sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, overall, was Comic-Con pretty cool?
It was. It keeps growing and growing every year. I mean, it's just a monster of an event, and a lot of the people who participate in it are frustrated with it and think it needs to move. But, I mean...
Move? How come?
Because they want some place that's bigger and has more room, and it's not going to solve the problem. But especially Saturday, even outside. I usually just go outside and experience everything going on in the city because there's so much, and you see all the displays set up and the advertising going on and the free stuff being handed out. Saturday, inside, it's one thing. I mean, you move around. To me, I equate it like going to IKEA or something where you like kind of move around like cows, just like follow where you're supposed to go. Mm-hmm. But that's really how it was here Saturday, outside even, and to an extreme. I mean, at some points I could have just picked up my feet and the crowd would have carried me.
Really?
So that many
Holy
people.
moly.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I wanted to go to a NASA panel, but I wasn't able to get into that because the game of San Diego Comic-Con is waiting in lines. I don't like waiting in lines. Mm-hmm. I'll do it, but certainly not camping out the night before or the afternoon the day before to get into a panel the next day.
So you miss half the weekend because you're in line.
Yeah, I mean,
wow.
A lot of these people, you're lucky if you do one thing a day, because you've got to spend your time in line.
Wow.
So for this NASA panel, it wasn't even in a large room. And I figured allocating an hour and a half to stand in this line to get into this panel would be okay, would be more than okay. No.
Not close.
Hour and a half before this thing, they'd already capped the line. I didn't get to get in. I suspect it's because Buzz Aldrin was there, but Seth Green was moderating this thing, and the Mohawk guy, Bob Akvardowski, was there. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, space and the exploration and looking for extraterrestrial life is hugely popular right now. Everybody's interested in this. I think this panel was more popular than anybody suspected it would be.
Cool. That reminds me, Lee Spiegel's supposed to have a story up where it's like Buzz versus Edgar Mitchell because Lee is mad at Buzz for making some disparaging remarks on Huffington Post Live.
That's right.
About UFO people.
Yep.
It's going down, the showdown.
I'd like to see that match.
Yeah, we'll
put him in the ring. Let's go.
So, but you got into the unsealed or unexplained files pretty easy because did it help because you were supposed to be like a special guest, right? They invited you to the Science Channel.
Yeah. The Science Channel, we have a good relationship with the guys over there, and we were invited, and I got
so they hooked you up
a special front row seat. So that was fun.
Awesome.
That was fun.
Yeah, sweet.
And the moderator of that panel was actually I believe the editor-in-chief of Popular Science magazine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's very interesting because they are mega skeptics.
Right.
I mean, they are really bad. If it's a Popular Mechanics story on this topic, unfortunately, because I like Popular Mechanics, but you're going to find they go overboard. They go like with the skeptics where they do, they don't give the full facts and they explain everything away.
Everybody seemed to be very much into this show, though.
Cool.
And I thought it was a great panel.
Awesome. Great to hear. Wonderful. Thank you for the news.
Well, we're still doing the news. What's your story you want to talk about?
Oh, yeah. You know what? I got to plug because this week was the week of guest writers.
Yeah.
It kept me so busy because these stories were so long. posting all of these pictures all week. I was so busy, Jason, when you were gone.
I understand.
Because then Maureen was gone Friday, but it was a lot of fun because these are great stories.
They are, but that's why I cheated and went with the unexplained files, because I could just talk about Comic-Con.
Yeah, but that's cool. I wanted to talk about that anyway. Right. That's awesome. So last week we had we had one from Don Schmidt, and I've wanted to post this for a while. I had Kevin Randall on, and we talked about the research I had done about Doty and MJ12 files and some of that disinformation and everything. But and I referred to Don Schmidt, who Kevin Randall worked closely with for a long time on Roswell. And Don had sent me a paper, and I think I referred to it in that show, about his kind of perspective about how this all went down and some things that happened that other people don't know about, because he was also here during that period of time. And so he sent me that story. He let me post it because he had written it for a Japanese magazine. So as far as I know, it hadn't been read in the States. So I posted that, and it's a great article. It talks about, a lot of his perspective about how this all happened. Funny enough, because he's a big Roswell guy, Roswell's his life, he talks about how, when he first even heard about Roswell, because this was all kind of together, Stanton and William Moore talk about Roswell, then MJ12 and blah, blah, blah. He thought Roswell was ridiculous. Right. This sounds like a bunch of hooey to me, he said. So he writes about that, and of course, he got really into Roswell. But interesting enough, even though he's a Roswell guy, he talked about how, studying quickly, they were able to determine, and he explains why, because of all the fishy stuff going on back then. Quickly, they decided that it wasn't a matter of whether MJ12 papers were real, but who hoaxed them. And that was where their investigation centered around. So it's really cool to have insight from behind the scenes on how this all happened and what the researchers of the time felt. And so that's called William Moore, UFO Opportunist or Agent of Disinformation. But just to talk about what the other articles are, just for people, we also had one on a crop circle exhibit in the Wiltshire Museum that was written by Andres Mueller, a German ufologist who's written a couple things for us lately. And let's see, we had another one. Oh, an interview with UFO researcher Jacques Vallée. And this is really cool because it's some French UFO researchers who wrote this story. They're followers of Open Minds, and their website's ovnis-direct.com. And ovnis, it's, a lot of the Latin languages uses the term ovni, as many of you know. It's like object volantis, I forgot how it all goes, non-identificados. So it's essentially flying UFO objects that is not identified, is what OVNI stands for. But ovnis-direct.com, and they've got a great long interview where 4 of their researchers, including a Swiss ufologist and some others, asked Jacques a lot of questions. And so it's a long article and very, very interesting. So it's a great article, and I guess George Knapp had Jacques Vallée on Coast to Coast last night. I was checking my Facebook and stuff, and I saw that. So that's kind of cool. But I guess that's it. We got a lot of hits on this one, too, that MUFON got, for a Roger Marsh story where a grandmother says Wright-Patterson UFO and alien stories are true. And essentially just this lady who said her grandma asked some guy, who worked at Wright-Patterson, is that stuff real? And he said it was. This is the gist of it. But just another, witness who came forward and posted something on MUFON. So, of course, we're loving Roger's stories. So, I don't know. Did you want to comment on any or all of that?
Excellent stuff. We've got a lot of excellent stuff on openminds.tv.
So it's fun. I mean, it's cool that people are submitting stuff to us. We love it. So really, we just for people out there who want to submit stuff to us, Remember, we try to take a journalistic kind of point of view. So we do, try to report on the news rather than just spew a bunch of opinion and speculation out there. And speculation isn't bad if you're reporting on it. In other words, this scientist thinks that. But someone has to have a reason why you care what they have to say, essentially. I mean, when the news covers speculation about something happening, they're asking an expert. Like Don Schmidt, his is more anecdotal around, what happened back then. But it's really interesting because it's all of it's some important history when it comes to ufology. And, of course, he is an authority. And one of the interesting things I thought was Paul Harvey. He had a connection with Paul Harvey, who was a big news guy at the time. And Paul Harvey would carry UFO stories. But during this whole thing, Jamie Shandera, I guess, went out, who was William Moore's partner, and he was spewing a lot of crazy stuff, and Paul Harvey said, it totally ruined their relationship with him over this whole thing. So he documents that, something I did not know. It's fun. There's so many interesting facts that you get to uncover, with all of this stuff. So we never run out of content.
No, and personal stories like that are great, but the preferred content, like you said, is objective reporting with cited sources.
Yeah.
But if you
embedded in the story, so you can say in the story, I asked so and so. You don't have to put a number one and then put a reference on the bottom. But,
that's right. We don't do footnotes on the website. But,
I try not to.
Inline citations, and if you want to contribute anything, of course, you can always send it to us at contact@openminds.tv.
That's right, Jason. So, without further ado, unless you have some more ado to spew.
I always have ado to spew, but we'll call it a day with that.
All right. Well, it's so fun doing it face-to-face like this, so we'll see. I'm sure in the future we'll be able to do this occasionally. It'll be even more special because it'll be far and few between.
That's right. We'll do this occasionally. We might do it on location at certain events. And, at the very least, you can tape a picture of my head, like right here.
Yeah.
And you can pretend we're talking face-to-face.
That would be nice. That would be very nice. But we meant to do, and I guess some MUFON stuff, but we were so busy. Yeah. But if you go watch Spacing Out, you'll be able to see some video interviews, and then we're going to post some more interviews from MUFON, the MUFON Symposium soon here. But check out Spacing Out. It's always a lot of fun. All right. Well, let's go ahead, and speaking of a lot of fun, a lot of you are probably really into space warp and space warp technology. I mean, think of this, actually having a space warp capable spacecraft. That's what I want. That's why I'm into ufology. I want to ride a spaceship into space. And David Paris may be the guy who's making that happen. Some people are very skeptical, of course, because these are some extraordinary claims. But let's talk to David and see why he thinks he's going to make this happen. I am so excited to have back on the show David Paris. Hello.
Hi, how you doing, Alejandro?
Good, doing very well. I think this is the third time you've been on the show.
I believe that's correct, yes.
Yeah, I just realized that, because often we don't have many people back a lot, but I'm so fascinated by what you're doing. But I guess at first to kind of, so you can elaborate, because it's hard to talk about everything that you do because you do so much, but you're an adjunct professor at the University of Nebraska and elsewhere, and some of the topics you teach, right, are like geology and meteorology and things like this?
Astronomy, right, physics, but again, those are all taught at a variety of different colleges around in the area. Mm-hmm. Also teach online, and it's a busy schedule, I'll put it that way.
Right. So you're keeping busy all the time. And then you also have, I guess, are the faculty administrator for one of the only, or maybe the first, MUFON college organization.
Yeah, that's right. I'm the faculty advisor for the MUFON Society at UNO, University of Nebraska at Omaha. So we are the first college organization, MUFON-based club. That's pretty exciting. We formed that on December of 2013. So this is almost come this December will be our first year of operation. And, getting new membership in, and it's been very, very exciting with the new equipment that we've been developing, techniques. We also have the Paranormal Society. So that one meets right after the MUFON Society. So every Saturday, 4 hours a day. Two for one, two for the other.
Wow, 4 hours.
Yeah. A lot of members that attend one meeting will attend the other as well. I would say the paranormal has sparked a lot of interest across the campus and from outside groups that participate. We usually have 10, 15 people at any given time. Some weeks it's even more, packs the room. A steady stream. We all know that we're there, so not everybody's going to attend every single meeting. So you see a lot of coming in every other week or once a month, something like that. But it's all fun. Yep. Everybody shares the collective knowledge here.
Well, and I guess before we move on to other topics, one of the things that, and I'm sure some of the MUFON guys have asked you this, we just had the MUFON Symposium last weekend, and it's always a hot topic, and how do you get younger people involved in UFO research and in MUFON in general? And what has been your secret? What do you think has helped you all get the younger crowd?
Well, there's a really good organization on the university campus, and they have a club fair twice a year, and in the fall and in the spring. And they have a lot of tables out. You put out your club banners and things, and students come up and sign. We usually have 25, 30 students sign up that they want to become members of the club, and for both organizations. And the fact that it's on a weekend, some students then are limited because they have to work, because they're paying their way to go through school. And that is probably a larger problem for most of the student body itself in participating in other outside activities from the academics. But a secret, well, we still have that stigma when you talk about UFOs, even that there are a majority of people that have seen or believe in UFOs, that they do exist. But there's still that taboo, that stigma about ufology. And we approach it from more of a scientific point of view, and we also train a lot of the field investigators that eventually are deployed across in the field for the state MUFON organization. So we're kind of a feeder for that, and almost every member is a field investigator. So that works out to everybody's benefit. But the true secret, you got to have definitely an interest, but I think our approach on looking at this from a scientific point of view, a rational point of view of analyzing the data, let the data lead you, I believe that people see that for what it's worth, and that you're not just making things up, or you just believe everything that comes across the table, but you're actually analyzing it. And we've developed an awful lot of tools, and when people start to see some of the, like our fractal analysis tool, we can look at imagery and determine whether that image has been tampered with or not. In other words, has it been photoshopped? And I would say probably 95% of all the imagery that we get across our desk that people submit to us has been tampered with. And now we can make that determination in about 30 seconds as we run it through the fractal analysis. And really what this does, I don't want to give away the trade secret here, because this will aid the people who can fake imagery pretty good. We'll give them too many clues on what are we looking for. But in any kind of image, a snapshot that has been made that is truly a picture of, say, a background environment, the fractal analysis will have everything blended in together. And when you do a Photoshop, it breaks the pattern. And that's very, very difficult to fake, to put that into an existing environmental pattern. And that's the secret, which can somebody defeat? You would spend a lot of time, potentially a lot of money, to try to fake something. But could it be, or could you? The answer would be yes, but probability-wise, it would be very difficult, I believe, to kind of do this without us noting some kind of differentiation into the pattern backgrounds.
So
we've developed some interesting tools.
Mm-hmm. Have you ran across then some imagery that you feel is legitimate, is genuinely unknown?
We've looked at the traditional ones that, like Bruce Maccabee and those guys have analyzed and said that Mineville, Titusville Lake, there's some imagery that we have actually looked at that is what it is. It's not fake. Mm-hmm. It has all the proper background identification as far as the fractal patterns through the sky, through the craft, and the blending of everything. Whereas several of the more recent type images, we find that there are breaks in the patterns, and you can see where these things have been overlaid on top and superimposed.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's quite revealing. It's actually part of our website. We have an actual tutorial on how to use it, and we describe everything so people can actually utilize this as instead of or in lieu with photogrammetry type techniques that are out there. I'm not aware of anybody else doing what we do in analyzing imagery.
Cool. And which website is this?
If you go to the Omaha UFO Study Group,
okay.
This is it's exterior to the university, but you have to be a student to get to our website on the university's Blackboard system. Mm-hmm. But we have done another website from the Omaha UFO Study Group, and we've incorporated our radio archives of the quantum state and spooky action at a distance radio shows. A lot of them are all science-based radio programs, and they talk about UFOs, paranormal, all these other type of things. We also use that same technology in the paranormal. So it's been kind of a nice cross between the two clubs, using similar hardware, similar software for analysis of imagery. Mm-hmm. Worked out real nice.
So, and before I move away from this, because it's an interesting topic, has there been a popular UFO photo that you all have debunked, that you thought, wow, you thought this was something real and then discovered it wasn't? One that perhaps people who follow this field would know.
You remember there was a series of photos that came out from California. There was this kind of an elongated craft. I call it the ironing board.
Is that the drones? The California drones?
The drones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they're all fake.
Yeah, it's funny because you're not the only ones to say that, but there are researchers, one in particular who spoke for the MUFON conference, but she is adamant that those are real. I won't use her name, but I guess since I've given you her gender, it won't be too hard to figure out who that is.
Well, but I think you have to remember too is the things that we've evolved and developed. You know, we've run hundreds and hundreds of images. We've run the comparative images. We've taken regular photos and analyzed them like an airplane against the sky. We've taken photos, have analyzed them, And so we've run them through a myriad of different tests and sets. And when a hoax comes up or a fake or something that's been photoshopped, it's very rapidly and readily discernible with the software. Mm-hmm. Now, does this work 100% so far? We haven't really seen deficiencies in this, but it does what it's supposed to do. And again, it's in the eyes of the analyst, the ultimate final response to clarifying whether an image is hoax, Photoshop, or it's the real deal. It's up to the analyst, and I usually do that final piece of it because I know what I'm looking for as a result of in the process of developing this kind of process, this technique. Mm-hmm. But like I said, I don't know very many people that use this. Usually it's pixelization. Those are usually good telltale signs. Particularly when a craft is high-resolution pixels, but yet the photo itself is coarse. I mean, right there, that kind of strikes off the, Photoshop, a poor hoax, and even in video. Was it the one was over in Jerusalem,
right?
Where the entity comes down, supposed to be a craft, and they're photographing it, and some college students over here. Well, it's all been debunked as actually being a hoax, but the first thing that caught my eye, that being in Jerusalem like that, if a craft came down and was there for that long a period of time, you would have seen an F-16, some type of fighter jet, in the area, cruising around quickly, because they don't mess around. If something's in their airspace, they're going to come after it. Mm-hmm. And that was one thing that whole scenario lacked, and that was the first key for me. And I said that as soon as we saw it. I said, something bothers me. I got a gut feeling about this. Yeah. And then we actually took snapshots of the frames of the video. We ran it through the analyzer, and the light's square. So when you're looking at the craft itself in the frame, it has a square light frame around it. Well, light doesn't go in a square, and it was immediately thrown out as this is a hoax.
Yeah,
a nice one.
Yeah, and there are other reasons too. The circumstances around the video. We've got a story on our website about it, and it's interesting that these cases that are really striking and good hoaxes, even when evidence to demonstrate they aren't real comes out, some people want to believe so badly that they can't let it go.
Well, you also have that the one out of what is it, Brazil?
Mm-hmm. The most popular UFO video.
Yeah, where they were shooting something at a appears to be like a factory complex of some type, and there was a lens-shaped or saucer-shaped craft configuration in the sky, and they've shot several different frames of it. Now, we haven't analyzed that yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm aware of this.
This one came about...
recently, from Sefa'a.
It was just last week.
Gotcha, I know what you're talking about. Right, Sefa'a, the official UFO organization out there, had investigated it. Right.
And we haven't had a chance to run that through the analyzer yet, because we're looking for a non-clipped shot of it.
Right.
We're trying to see if we can get an actual image of it that would be, what was sent to somebody to analyze. Mm-hmm. We'd like to get one of those and throw it through the analyzer and see if it meets the criteria.
Do you know
that possibility could be be the real deal? I mean,
do you know
the quote? Go ahead.
I was going to say, do you know Leslie Kane?
Yes, I mean, I don't know her personally. I have heard of her and her book. Yes.
I do know of her personally, and I could get her, I'll let her know what you're doing and get you her contact information, because I know she would have access to the best copy that Sefa'a has.
Oh, excellent. excellent. Yeah, we'd love to put that through get it into the system and run it through the software. And we'd be able to give her provide an analysis that could be put onto a website. And again, I can understand people's feelings on this thing. You know, I think we all want to, you know, see the real smoking gun and have the physical evidence in that. But you got to be careful. I mean, it's like with anything in science, it's got to be repeatable. It has to be analyzed. It has to be looked into extensively.
Well,
just to accept it for what it is, you know, immediately is probably, I guess you have to be more skeptical than just totally accepting.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between a lot of the people who are in the field, and everybody has different opinions. That's what makes the whole thing go around, you know what I mean?
Right, it's definitely not a bad thing. I mean, it has to be that way. And then another question then would be, since we've debunked, and people are probably getting frustrated at that, but what about images that you have verified that are convincing to you that are real, maybe some striking ones that you maybe thought was a hoax, but it passed the scrutiny of your tests? Have there been some like that?
It was actually on the paranormal side. We had one of our real excellent photographers and electronic and also chemical, you know, the old methods of making photographs. And he sent us an image of a ghost in an apartment, an apparition in an apartment. And he says, I got this from a friend. Can you verify this? And so we put it through, and we looked at it at 30 seconds later and go, well, this is an overlay. This is a fake. And he goes, good, because it is. He made it up, and he sent it. But this guy is very clever. He's very, very good at what he does. And so despite the fact that he made and did his best to make this look as authentic as possible, we were able to tell that it was a fake. And to answer your question, as far as the UFOs go, actually some of the older photographs are the ones that we've seen through the process that, now, I have to qualify this, all right, is that the photo itself was not tampered with. In other words, there wasn't an overlay or, you know, manipulation of the photograph. But that doesn't preclude somebody throwing a hubcap into the sky, and there would be other reasons why it would become more bad than not, you know, the aspect ratio of where it is in the sky, how it is behind or in front of a power line, you know, small little telltale things there. But as far as the image goes of the photograph, nothing was done other than we can say that it was an actual photograph that had not been tampered with from a photographic point of view. However, from the background, in other words, if somebody tossed an object up into the sky, we would not be able to tell, other than doing the next step of investigation of trying to quantify aspect ratio, shadows on the ground, and doing then all the other photogrammetry type scenarios that one would go through to try to validate an image that would be taken on a photographic emulsion. So I have to make that distinction.
Right.
Okay? Because this is a several-step process, but this eliminates, 95% of all the images that we've ever seen that we process through our system. But there are those few that then deserve additional scrutiny and attention.
Right.
Titusville Lake comes to mind. That one still, to this very day, intrigues me. It's a color image. It's a disc-shaped object flying over the lake, and there appears to be like a wake, a very subtle wake underneath onto the water surface where the craft goes over. Now, is that a remnant, a tidal action from the craft? If we're discussing like a localized space warp around the craft or something, if that's the mechanism that they're using, is there tidal action remnant from that across the water? Is that what I'm seeing in there? And so it just lends itself at that point, since we verified that that image wasn't tampered with from our aspect of the analysis, then we got to go into the secondary analysis of this and pick it apart. Was it a remote-controlled craft, like a model airplane designed as a disc? These types of technologies that are available make this thing become very difficult to validate. And there you go. Mm-hmm. It's again, the final piece of this is the analyst that takes all the tools out of his little bag there and tries to yay or nay on this.
Well,
or that in conclusion, I really can't make a determination. It looks good, but
right.
There you are.
All right, so we talked a lot about photo analysis, just because that's interesting, and we'll move on to the space warp. Now, last time you were on the show, you talked about your space warp program and project, and how you have a theory. At the time, you had tested some of your ideas on laser, and I believe that you were able to record an effect. But now, you sent me a paper a few days ago where it seems you've done some further testing on larger objects and have had further effect. And some of the interesting stuff I found from that paper, and we'll get into more detail. Of course, a lot of it is over my head, honestly. But some of the stuff that I found interesting is now you have I don't know if this was the case back then, but now you have a full team of people working on this, and you've also got some patents, and you're building model spaceships to test.
Yes, yeah, all of that is true.
All of it's very exciting.
It is here as well. We deliberately have held back on producing the paper for about 2 years now. We've known that all of this does work at low power levels, and we have spent tremendous amounts of time and energy in experiments, a variety of experiments, to validate the fact that microspace warp on this low-level power that we're using does exist. It does work empirically, and it also verifies our theory about it. So we've been very, very skeptical on everything that we've done, and I guess we're the worst skeptics of the that will then look at the paper and say, no, you can't do this. Well, we spent an awful lot of time going through everything is verifiable, everything is reproducible, and as part of the scientific method, you've got to be able to reproduce this, and we do all the time.
Right.
So it's not I believe, some type of other phenomena going on here because of the various pieces that we've been able to discover and uncover. Mm-hmm. And we use conventional power. There's nothing odd or exotic, whereas a lot of the theoreticians have said that you need antimatter or some type of dark energy, dark matter, to produce the effect of a space warp environment, which is to compress the fabric of space. We know that, say, for example, a black hole or a star, a massive planet, can actually alter the fabric of space. And Einstein's shown all this through his theory of general relativity. And we actually have measurements of these things that we can do. We know that the planets align around the sun very nicely. Everything looks like a pizza pie in the galaxy. And so we got a hub, and we got all these things floating out in a nice little array of stars and planets. And really the bottom line is, if you have something of a larger mass, you can induce a compression of the fabric of space. Now, on Earth, we do have phenomena, and thank goodness for the reporting of these events by pilots. And my involvement in all this came from that environment. I've always wondered why a lot of aircraft disappear without any kind of wreckage. Planes just poof, they're gone. And where do you look for them? This is their last location, but they're no longer here. And that's always intrigued me as what's really going on here. Most of it, I would say that 98% of everything of aircraft disappearances are environmentally caused. In other words, thunderstorms erupt, planes get caught up into rain squalls, and they disappear because of the severity of the weather out into the oceanic environments. And so I am referring to areas of the, quote, the mysterious Bermuda Triangle, but there's more evidence there that supports more environmental issues than anything else. In other words, rapidly developed thunderstorms and that. Mm-hmm. But to get back to the point about pilot evidence, we have four main cases that I've looked at, in addition to others, but these four stand out amongst the rest of them. And many people would say, well, these cases are very anecdotal, But is there any truth to any of these things?
Mm-hmm. And now, in these cases, now I know in one of the cases, the person moved a longer distance in a short amount of time without knowing how that happened. Is that true of all of these cases?
Yes, actually. The ones that I've done the forensic weather analysis with and the investigation on these cases, the Bruce Gernon case probably is the most documented because I actually have refueling tickets from him on the date. I have the flight logs. I had the time logs of when he took off and people that saw him take off and see him land. And so a lot of the information that was collected is all the data that was necessary to begin to make that analysis. And the bottom line is that conversations from the tower approach control to him. He had witnesses in the plane, his father and another business associate. All these things began to paint a picture that either he did time travel or he actually did space warp. Mm-hmm. And the fact that he went through these clouds, this hole between a closing ring of thunderstorms, was really kind of the key to solving the mystery here. Because for, I spent about 7 years researching this from the cases alone, trying to put together the pieces. And it was very perplexing. What's going on here? And then after reading the paper from Miguel Alcubierre that he had written in 1994, it began to shed some light on what was really going on. And it was funny that from a theoretical point of view, a lot of the things that he described in this paper on how you would not so much induce space warp, but what would happen if a craft got caught up in a space warp bubble.
And he was a Mexican physicist?
Yes. When he wrote the paper, he was at Cardiff University in Wales.
Oh, I see.
And he's now in university at Mexico City as a physicist there teaching.
And I mean, so for some background for people, I mean, the idea of this space bubble is, and the propulsion that you're proposing is an expansion of space behind the craft and then a compression in front of the craft, propelling
it. That's correct. And the craft is in a bubble that encompasses the, in this case, the motor. And if there was a crew there, if we expand this and scale this up, the idea is to put the entire craft into a bubble. And then the crew is not subjected to the momentum of, like, say, making a 90-degree turn at 100,000 miles an hour or 4,000 miles an hour, which you cannot do physically in an actual aircraft that we have produced and manufactured over the last 100 and
I did have a question along those lines.
Yeah.
Like, it seems like safety will be paramount when these craft are actually used. Because, for instance, if this bubble was turned on and someone was half in it and half out of it, would they be ripped in half?
Oh, I can't answer that.
Not sure. What would happen, huh? We'd have to try it.
We would have to try it, and that's why we do experiments. I've been working around these motors for like 2 years now, and we have not experienced any biological issues with being around these motors.
They caused any damage unexpected at all?
No.
So it's been pretty safe.
Yeah, we even have Geiger counters inside, and we've measured, and the only increase in radiation that we found was 1/2 of 1/1000th of a microrem. So that was the only measurable increase when we activated the system. So no temperature increases, no sound. We have an actual redshift to frequency. We've got meters that will measure the redshift, and that would be another aspect of why we very 100. Well, is anything 100%? We believe at a very high rate of confidence that what we are seeing in this motor is actually a compression of the fabric of space. And it actually does pull. It has a V shape on the arrays, the panels, and they're open somewhere around 70 degrees or so, and we use that to focus the compression of the fabric of space. Now, what's interesting here is that many people would say, well, if this motor configuration is a V, then it should be cause and effect relationship. In other words, you should be able to thrust away with the open V. Well, that's not how it works. The open V actually pulls towards any direction that you put it at. So in other words, if you have it on and we only use mechanical devices. You cannot put this near electronic. I mean, it puts out a lot of field. And one of the interesting things in the paper you may have seen is we have an interactive device that measures all the RF fields that are generated from this thing. And it shows a negative deflection onto the meter. Now, we take samples every quarter second with this. And we will be posting this entire paper on our website, which is the paraspacewarpresearch.org website, and that will be posted by the end of the month here. But when people get to see this, they'll actually see one of the graphs that we've made of the actual data that we collected, and it plots it all out. And this is actually what we recorded on, I believe it's April 6th, on this particular experimental run. But the meter goes negative for a few seconds, and the field builds, and then it progresses for so many seconds along that experiment. And then when we release, we cut power to the system, and then the field bounces back and generates a huge amount of power that was not expected to be seen. And for about 1.5 to 2 seconds, we have extra power that we haven't put into the system. I have special watt meters that analyzes the output from our equipment to the engine, and when we cut power, it immediately goes to zero. But yet the meter is still collecting this energy that keeps going on for another couple of seconds that shouldn't be there.
Do you think there's maybe like an over-unity kind of effect happening?
Well, I think what's happened is kind of like everything in nature. If you ionize something, it'll always revert back. If you over-oscillate something and you get photons, blowing out of atomic structures, as soon as the energy levels go down, it picks up the electrons reorbit. we orbit up versus orbiting down. And I think this is a similar relationship. When the fabric of space decompresses, it releases the energy that essentially made it.
Now, I want to establish credibility here. We've talked about you. You've got degrees in geography, engineering. You're a professor. You teach meteorology. But
physics and astronomy. Yeah, I teach all these subjects.
Right. And your team as well. I mean, your team, you have a software and aircraft engineer and designer, flight systems control engineer who's also a test pilot, and then a couple students, graduate students?
Well, actually, Matt Judah, who is the co-author of the paper, he's actually in Colorado right now getting his PhD in physics and astrophysics, actually. Uh-huh. And he's working in the lab out there to earn his way through to get his PhD. Mm-hmm. It's about a 3-year program, but we're in touch all the time, and we talk back and forth. I manufacture everything. I build all the equipment and that. Mm-hmm. So when we talk, we discuss things, we bounce ideas back and forth and that. And I go out into the lab, and part of the team, if I need help, they come in, they help take down or write down the measurements.
Right.
We do an awful lot of adaptive engineering. So you don't go down to the local store or even the hardware store to pick up this equipment. All this stuff is customized. Mm-hmm. And so we spend an awful lot of time developing it, making sure everything works correctly, interfaces correctly. There's just an awful lot of work that goes on with this stuff.
Right.
And yes, we do have a spacecraft that I designed. Mm-hmm. I put through a wind tunnel. Everything works great, and there's thousands of hours of hand-made aluminum fabrication that has gone into that craft. And like I said, when people can go to the website today and they can see actual pictures of the craft and its development, we call it the Bluebird 2, and it's more symbolic of an aircraft that was built just down the street from here in the old Exarban airfield. That was one of the first. Was the second 5-passenger airplane in the world that was developed. It was named the Bluebird. It was only 3 blocks from the house here, and so it's a symbolic tribute to them of Henry W. Ashmussen, who developed this in a 200 horsepower engine. It was the first air-cooled motor that they ever had. That was all manufactured and built right here in Omaha. And as tribute to him and his historical marks that he's left back in aviation, we named the craft the Bluebird 2. Mm-hmm. And we've also got our own motor. It's just very odd that this area here is like a cradle of aviation of development over the past 100 years. Just very, very fascinating. And the fact that here we are 3 blocks north of them, of where all this took place, and that we've developed an engine, and in our craft at full size capacity would carry 7 to a pilot, co-pilot, and 5 passengers.
Yeah,
and it wasn't just as to mimic their feat back then in 1920,
right? But
that it was from a practicality standpoint of a 30-foot craft. How much can you get into this thing? That type of deal. So that's where we're at with this. But we have a quarter-scale version of this, and as we evolve our next size engine, our more powerful motor, the object here is to actually take this craft off the ground and use it as a UAV, unmanned aerial vehicle, for testing, and then build bigger craft from that. So
and I mean to kind of summarize for people. I mean, what you did is you observed this space warp, that natural occurring space warp from pilot reports. And now you've tested your theory as to how that happened using the lasers. However, now you've built a UAV like you've talked about, and a larger engine. And like you said, this engine is V-shaped. piece of metal that you can see sits on this thing, and it looks like there's an arm so it can move around. And now you're testing the effects on this.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And this whole thing is a natural occurring phenomena. It's not sustainable in a thunderstorm. But what we did was after a number of aircraft flights, and I took a lot of measurements. And this is when I did these programs for Discovery, History Channel, National Geographic, and all this. When we did our flying, I brought instruments with me, and I actually wrote down a lot of all the stuff that I collected. And as each flight went on, I collected more and more. Bottom line was, discovered that the internals of the clouds, the way the fields are structured, this is what I brought into the lab, the tripole fields. And if indeed that this created this non-sustainable environment for an aircraft to pop out, and go 100 miles in less than a second, or 300 miles, which we have cases of that, then you should be able to reproduce this in the lab. And this whole thing came down to that. I did do the forecasting for when would these things occur naturally, and we were going to fly near them to take additional measurements and pictures to see these little warp hole tunnels between the clouds. Except it was really said, and comments were made that this is pretty dangerous to do. When you're not really when you're looking for something, these things happen when people weren't even expecting this. And to go looking for it you may get lost. You may have an accident. So that I made a decision to try to bring this into the lab, and so I developed a set of antennas that would then mimic this. And then from the antennas, I was faced with a bigger problem. Well, how do I get an airplane between, if I were trying to artificially induce this stuff, how do I get an airplane between two huge antennas? Is this what I do? And I use huge amounts of power to try to induce this kind of field, or do I somehow miniaturize this and try to build an engine that would then, through a series of multiple motors, is then build a warp bubble around the craft? And through our testing and development, and as you'll see onto the website, the pictures of the fractal arrays that we use, is that's exactly what we discovered, was that you could put multiple motors side by side, and you can steer by warping the fields of each motor. And you can then incorporate the bubbles that are created from both motors into one. So this kind of led us to other phenomenal discoveries in that respect of how can you manipulate and articulate an entire craft. In other words, have to be able to have total axial control of a craft, go up, down, side to side, up, down, invert the craft, basically do anything you want, maneuvering in the sky. So our intent is to build a craft that can essentially sit on the Earth, go to space, and come back and carry products, or whatever you need from asteroid belts coming back here, for mining operations, and do this for less than $10 a pound. Mm-hmm. And right now it costs like $10,000 a pound to waft something into space. Wow. And our goal ultimately is to, have the beginnings of a space-based society,
now,
a spacefaring nation.
So from what I understand in your paper, you've tested this engine, and if I understand it correctly, you were able to, for instance, shape or put the V in an upward direction and turn it on, and the craft then lost weight. So it became...
That's correct. Yes.
Demonstrating the effect.
And what we now do is we have the motor is suspended from a vertical scale. I have a brand new motor that we just engaged it 4 days ago. It took like several months to build this new engine and design it. And I just fired it up the other day, and that one pulled the vertical scale down, so 500-gram scale, and the motor weighs in with its electronics and the actual fractal arrays at 340 grams. And we were able to move on the scale. We use a laser and a mirror reflected back to a projection screen. And we moved 4 millimeters in 30 seconds, which is pretty phenomenal based on when you make some comparisons to an ion drive engine in space. When you engage an ion drive engine on the surface of the Earth, it doesn't do anything. It's the equivalent of like having a piece of paper in your hand. And for us, at 100 watts of power, we're running at 3.3 millinewtons, where they're only doing, like for example, like on the Dawn spacecraft, 93 millinewtons. That's 0.93 millinewtons. And so in comparison to speeds attained in space using the same criteria that NASA does, we made a comparison at the 52-minute mark, and we've also made comparisons at their 4-year mark, because an ion drive is an accumulative process. So is ours. And so the warping of space actually is accumulative as you keep jumping from A to B in the compression of space. Now, you're still covering the same distance, except you've scrunched up space in front of the craft, in this case in front of the motor. So some of the numbers that they have after 4 years of ion drive in space, and this is the fastest craft that humans have ever made, 26,700 miles per hour. And in comparison, after 4 years of a similar craft at 100 watts of power, we would be able to attain, under the same criteria that they have, 3 million miles per hour.
So far you've used 100 watts. What's the next step? Like, how do you actually achieve? How do you get this thing lifted up off the ground?
Well, and we have some charts that we've made based on our low-level power experiments, and it appears like the break point is someplace in around the 5,000 watt area for like 100 pounds. And it may be even less than that, but, as this motor that I just made is doubled, using the same amount of power, we've doubled the output. In other words, we've doubled the distance than what our previous motor was. So we're making a lot of progress. However, people's expectations, and this is what we have to, we have to face reality here. Despite the fact that what we've done is remarkable just by itself, and I'm pretty humble in a lot of respects, okay? But what we have actually measured and quantified is absolutely incredible, of what we've been able to accomplish with what little we have. And the other interesting part of this is that as we keep developing this is model number 7. So we've had 7 other engines behind this from the beginning to today. And this motor from the previous motor has doubled its capacity with the same amount of power. And that is impressive. I mean, from the guy who builds all these things, you know what I mean, to get that kind of output from the same amount. And so to answer your question, the next step is we have a 1,000 watt unit that we're working on to put into an engine of this size, and to see where that brings us. All these things are custom, and these things are hand built.
Right.
So there's a lot of design work that goes into this, and then there's other problems that we have to face. But ultimately, our next stage here is to fire up the 1,000 watt unit, put it into this motor, and to see where this takes us, and take the measurements and do all the same process that we have here. and to get this next provisional patent out as quick as we can.
Mm-hmm. So who has seen the paper, and what made you comfortable that this was the time to write the paper, and what's next for the paper?
Well, we have given it to several people to take a look at. A couple of engineers, a physicist, and all of them will tell me it reads well, they like what they're seeing, except it's over their head and they can't vet it. So that's one of the other problems that we're going to face is there aren't too many people that have developed a warp drive motor and that can get it vetted by the scientific community. There's only a handful of people who are working on this kind of stuff, mostly from a theoretical point of view. But, they potentially could pose a problem in the acceptance of this because their ideas are more from an exotic energy point of view, not low-level power, where we've, I believe, have proven beyond any doubt, we have the statistics as in addition to the empirical, that says that this does what it's supposed to do. And all the criteria that one would look for in a compression of space scenario, this is what would happen. So I'm willing to put it out there. People want to criticize it, go for it. It doesn't stop me from doing what I do. But I thought it was about time that at least the world knew that work was being done on this. And we haven't had the website up. We've had well over 10,000 people view our website from all over the world. I know there's interest out there. But now the fact that we have, in a sense, summarized, the paper basically summarizes 2 years of the research and provides the statistics, provides the data. It is reproducible. I'm certainly not going to give all the blueprints away and say, here, everybody just build one of these to verify it. That's not going to happen, okay?
Right.
But if they want to look at some of the data that we produced and the results that we've attained, I'm more than willing to share.
Right.
With everybody.
People, Alcubierre, his work is well regarded, right? It's more along the lines, and many theoretical physicists believe that may work, that at extreme high energy needs, but you're demonstrating that it's much less power, much less power that would be needed.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and again, I always like to make the comparison against a spacecraft, for example, that's actually flying in space right now. And the Dawn spacecraft, whether NASA appreciates that or not, I mean, it is a known quantity, okay? And we definitely like to make those comparisons because that's the only thing people, telling people that you can move 4 millimeters in 30 seconds, they could care less. But when you make the comparison is that the Dawn spacecraft has basically 2,000 watts of energy available to the craft. They have 3 engines on board. One motor takes at least 666 watts of power, and they only produce 91 millinewtons. And we only use 5% of that at 100 watts, okay? And we can achieve a speed that far out produces against what they have. Now, again, we're using numbers that are the same, the criteria. We're using the same criteria that they use to analyze their specific impulses. We do the same thing. And based on our raw motor output, we make the same analysis just like they. And this is what we would then predict to be our speeds and the amount of Newton's force that we would have coming out in space based on what they utilize. So we're encouraged from that aspect, but it also gives other people an idea from a piece of paper in your hand to the equivalent weight of a tablet in your hand of what actually the kind of force that we produce or they're 52 minutes of specific impulse time. So, yeah, we'd like to, we definitely would like to take this to space. And we're thinking of, we're not thinking, we're actually intending to do a crowdfunding scenario sometime in September, because, to be honest with you, I'm out of money.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking this as far as I personally can take it. I work 5 jobs, so, I'm about to the end of what I can supplement into this project. We need the next plateau, we need the next boost, which is the more powerful supplies and better engine than what we currently have. Even though it's only 4 days old, I'm already thinking of the next generation of this thing to produce even more results. So, in a way, this is when is a good time, when is not a good time. I don't know. I just think we'll throw it out there and see what happens.
Yeah. When do you plan to have the paper posted?
I was told by my web guy that it would be up and running by 1 August.
Okay.
And he's pretty good about that kind of stuff. Now, he's also translating this into French, and it's going to be sent over into the European websites that he has established over there, which everything ties back into ours, but he's making this thing available, I believe, not only in French, but I believe in German as well. And it's going to go around the world, and our idea here is to keep it in the public view, because it's extremely important that the world get a grip and to look at this from a blossoming technology that could bring the beginnings of a space-based economy. And that's something that the entire world needs to do. I think the United States needs to lead in becoming a spacefaring nation. And then with the rest of the world seeing that it works, moving out into space, this is something that's vital for our survival. Being able to bring in raw materials that we're lacking here onto the surface of the Earth. We have a lot of people that are utilizing lots of resources, and the only other way to actually supplement the need for the various resources is to go to the asteroid belt, go to the moon, mine helium-3, fusion reactors for the future of power generation. Essentially the sky's the limit, but you've got to get something that's affordable that can lift materials to and from space at a reasonable cost. $10,000 a pound keeps it out of the hands of private industry. When you get down below $10 a pound, it's more of an affordable deal at that juncture, where people will start to make that jump and say, hey, we need to go to space. We need to manufacture in space. We need to, for example, like make TFT screens or something like crystalline structures in space, because you can get these things to a near perfect environment.
Right.
Pharmaceuticals, so many different processes that has high error rates on the surface of the Earth, taken in a microgravity environment, and being able to move large payloads of materials up, back and forth from space, then provide a space-based economy that just really essentially never ends.
Mm-hmm.
Colonization, all these types of things, not just space stations, but the reality of the things that I think a lot of kids dreamt of from the 1950s and 60s with the advent of Star Trek and all this, I believe we're coming into the realm that is not that far distant in the future here, that we would be able to actually make that a reality.
That's what's kind of funny. Being a kid, a sci-fi kid, a lot of the technology's moved incredible. Our computers, our laptops, our cell phones, it's moved further beyond I could have ever imagined as a kid. But then again, when you thought about space and space travel, you think, oh, we'll be up there eventually. However, we haven't gone that far, really, in that arena. So we need this.
45 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 45 years. We have essentially sat on the Earth, other than robotic craft, sent out into space to explore. All great stuff. Don't get me wrong.
Well, and it almost feels like
human.
going backwards when we had rockets, space shuttle, now we're back to rockets, even the Mars program, using the Orion rocket and all of that. Looks a lot like the trip to the moon.
And haven't been back there for 45 years. I mean, it is kind of depressing. I mean, I was that kid on the carpet, laying on the living room floor watching Star Trek and the warp drive motors, although what they project as warp drive is not how these actually work. However, it's a nice sentiment. That we use the same word, warp.
Yeah.
warp drive. But as that 13-year-old kid laying on the floor in the 60s watching all this, more power, Scotty, it's really kind of come full circle. But I can tell you, if I hadn't ever gone into the field of meteorology and written weather models and all the things that I've done throughout my life, I would have never figured out how to make this actually to artificially initiate a small warp signature in a lab. If I would have just followed my initial thing of going into aerospace engineering, I probably would have never even addressed this at all.
So it's pretty exciting. You had given me the paper a few days ago, and I was at the MUFON symposium, and so you allowed me to show it to some people, and people were excited about it. Some were kind of skeptical, some were really excited. They thought it looked promising, but the sentiment overall, though, was kind of like the people you had gotten to look it over, which was, I'm not qualified to really say if this is valid or not, and so hopefully, I know there are many of them are like me, where they're looking for the right people who would know more about it. But that's what's exciting about getting your paper out. It's exciting, to see that you have these models that you've built and everything, and an idea, a plan for not just testing a theory, but building a craft. So we'll see what happens. It's very exciting, and hopefully some people will pick up on this, and you'll find some funding.
Yeah, and it really comes down to is that it is all reproducible, and it can be shown at any given time, and it's never been an issue. We've just had, like I said in the beginning of our interview, is that we have held back because of the potential skepticism that's out there. Made sure that anything that we've done, we've logged it, we've recorded it, but everything is reproducible. And that is a key in that, we did this one time and it worked, but take our word for it. Well, like I said, we're probably the bigger skeptics of the rest of them. We made sure that anything that we've done different experiments, done things different ways, they all come out the same way. Mm-hmm. And so we've been very pleased with the results, but we also know that we're going to be held to a higher level here in that taking that craft off the ground. I mean, despite all the years that we've spent on this, and if it was in another laboratory facility, everybody would be jumping up and down and, having a parade and all this. We know we're held to a different kind of standard. Get it off the ground, then I'll believe you. Mm-hmm. Because at that point, you don't have anything to say. You don't have any criticisms.
Right.
When it leaves the ground, all that stuff goes away.
Everything changes.
Everything changes at that point, even though that it could change today because of the results that we have. But I don't know. Some of my team members, they say, you take a kind of a negative look at some of this. I go, I just know how people are.
Right.
There's expectations. We've been so swamped with science fiction programs and spacecraft to do all these amazing things. Well, that's not reality. What I do is the reality of where we're at. We're basically crawling. And if we didn't have this, all we would have then is the theoreticians and their speculation on how things work. And so we've uncovered a lot of things. We're very pleased with all that, and we're just going to keep marching forward, and eventually we will get that craft off the ground. And perhaps when I do that, then we'll talk again.
Yeah, that'll be great. Well, and hopefully you'll get me an interview at that time, because everybody will want one. But, and that's the way it is. Theoreticians.
You always will be first. You always will be first in line. There you go.
I mean,
first to release the info.
That'll be great. But yeah, theoreticians typically write papers, but it's usually the engineers who actually have to get their arms dirty and build these things and get them to work. And it often happens that, the engineers get things to work before the mechanisms are completely understood.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm 100% with you on that one. Yeah, I'm the empirical scientist, the empirical engineer. Yeah. I'm not going to be swayed by somebody saying that it can't be done. I'll look at you and say, really? Because there it is.
Yeah.
I have always done that throughout my life. Is anything that I've proposed, I've always built a prototype. And I've been very successful with showing and demonstrating, here's the concept, but here's the real device. Yeah. And this is no different in my philosophy, is that you can talk a good game, but unless you've got the facts, figures, and the hardware or the physical device there, then all the rest of it's just words and diagrams and that. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that, because I'll tell you what, if Alcubierre did not write that paper, I would not have been influenced. So, this whole thing is kind of like all the cosmic tumblers, everything lines up because he did this, somebody thought of that, and it goes down the line. And what he proposed, most of them seem to fit. There are other things that doesn't seem to fit into the end results of what we've experimented with and what we've observed. But as the motor power increases, we may see higher tidal actions or disparities of light being manipulated around the motor in those capacities. But we have not seen that as of today. We have seen the warping of being able to manipulate the fields together and building a bubble from multiple sources. So we know that can happen. And I think the other individuals have always envisioned this as being one uniform, unified bubble that does this from the front and the back. And what I'm seeing in the lab, that's not how it works. I mean, I guess you could build it that way if you wanted to. One of Alcubierre's problems was that if you went out into space with this thing, how do you turn it off? He had more of kind of like perpetuality. And I can guarantee you, when you turn this thing off, you may go for a few more seconds afterwards, but when you cut power, you're sitting out there. Mm-hmm. It stops, You're kind of...
It's done.
And that's what I've seen. The spring scale goes back, It goes back into place. So we're actually measuring force and duration of time, all those types of things that go into this. But, I've always been very excited about our results and how this thing has progressed. But and I'm excited now talking with you on the phone on this in our interview. But I can guarantee you tomorrow we'll be back to work, and what's in the past is in the past.
Right.
We just keep working for more improvement for the future.
Yeah.
And that's how it works here. You can't live on the past glories of what you discovered. You got to keep pushing forward.
Right.
And that's where I am.
Well, thank you so much for coming back and being on the show again. It's all very exciting. I wish you all the luck in the world. I hope everything works out, and it's just would be great if we had this kind of shift where all of a sudden we do become spacefaring. So it's great to see you're moving forward and not standing still and running with this. So again, thank you for being on the show, and it'll be great to have people out there looking at the paper and getting some more feedback, too.
Well, thank you. And as always, it's always a pleasure talking with you. Always have a lot of fun when we get together and talk about this stuff.
Thank you so much to David Paris for joining us on the show. Remember, you can go to his website at Paris Space Warp Research, and he spells his last name P-A-R-E-S. Remember that? P-A-R-E-S. Paris. So, because it's different. You can even just go Google Paris Space Warp and you'll find it, but it's ParisSpaceWarpResearch.org is the website. So, and you'll be able to see the pictures of this spectacular, machine that he's built and their prototypes for, their actual spaceship that they want to build. So this is really, really interesting. Like I said, the MUFON guys are looking at it, and they're kind of all abuzz, and we'll see what they have to say. And it is difficult for them to say much, and of course I can understand why some of them would be skeptical, like David and I had talked about. But we'll see what happens, because of course if the implications are huge. And like I talked about with David, the engineers are often the guys who make this stuff happen. It's not the theoreticians. They're the ones kind of talking, but the engineers make it happen, and sometimes they're 2 steps ahead of the guys with the theories, because they actually make it happen. So this is really exciting. Hopefully it all goes well. All right, don't forget to check out Spacing Out. Like I said, we've got, they talked about the news, but they also had some interviews with some MUFON guys. So if you weren't able to make it to the MUFON Symposium, you'll get to see what it was like. So go check that out. I don't think we're going to have a Spacing Out actually this week because of Jason's move and everything. So join us again next week for another one next Friday. But however, we'll have another show next week. And in fact, I'm going to, like I said, try to do some updates. So we'll try to do some updates from, because we did get some updates from Mark D'Antonio on the UFO Talk program. So we'll get him on soon and we'll talk about that. There was something else I wanted to update you on that I can't remember. Well, we updated you with Margie K recently. So we have some more updates on projects that were ongoing that people keep asking, what's going on with this? What's going on with that? And to be honest, I don't know. So let's get the guys on it, and we'll talk about what's going on with those things. So we'll have that going on soon. So stay tuned. Of course, you can read all of the UFO news at openminds.tv. Now we have MUFON posting all of their news on our site. So our site, even more than before, is the UFO news spot online or anywhere. So you got to go check out our site, openminds.tv. And finally, I want to thank, what else should I? We have a video portal. I can tell you about that. We just started this up. We're going to be pushing this really soon, but you can be one of the first into it. We've got a video portal, and essentially, some of you can't make it to these lectures and everything, so we're putting them online. We also have, if you're not aware, a couple DVDs called Open Minds Investigates, where we investigate a lot of cases, or at least, have these video outlines of some of these big cases. And that is all on our video portal. You can go to the main page. You'll see a link in the upper right, or you'll also see something that says video portal. You can click either of those, or throughout the site, you'll see a video portal button. And in there, you can either rent the video for a couple bucks, or you can buy it so you can watch it forever for a couple bucks more. Or for just a couple bucks a month, you can subscribe and you can watch all the videos. And we're adding videos every month. So we've got a handful, I think a dozen or so up there now. And we're going to be putting more and more every month. So we'll be adding to this. So it's a gift that keeps on giving. And really the best thing is just subscribe, monthly. And then you can forget about it. But you always have access to go in there and watch all of these magnificent videos. And they are really cool because, of course, a lot of them are the UFO Congress, and we're making news at the UFO Congress all of the time. And I can tell you, people, the 2015 UFO Congress will be no different. We have some major things in the works for the Congress, and you guys are going to flip out. They'll be like, you guys will just be jumping up and down, You'll, hopefully you're not listening in the car when we release some of this news because you're going to be swerving on the road. I'll give you a warning, though. I'll say, okay, steady yourself, so I'll give you warnings when we... But we've got some really good stuff because we're going to have some really cool stuff at the 2015 UFO Congress. Right now, if you register, you get a major discount, so go do it as soon as possible. And as always, like I advise you guys, go reserve a room in the hotel because those book up extremely quick. But the symposium's going to be something like the 18th to the 22nd. I can't remember the February. So it's in February. So go register right now at ufocongress.com, or you can go to openminds.tv for that. But, we've got a lot of people who some haven't spoke before, but I know are going to be, just like last year, these are going to be the guys then speaking at all the conferences because they've got the latest and greatest. We keep our thumb on what's going on in this field every day. And so at the Congress, we like to invite people who are the newsmakers right now, not just the same people who are going to all the conferences. We love them all. We absolutely adore all of them. But we also want to bring out new people, so bring you new stuff and people you haven't seen before, and, bring out the new stars for the people doing new stuff to keep this whole field going. So you'll definitely want to check out the 2015 UFO Congress. And I think that's everything. So I also, as usual, want to thank the guy who makes the music, Caleb Hanks, because he does such an awesome job. Sometimes people ask, where can I get that music? That music, actually, that we play at the beginning is custom made. However, the song we play at the end, you can go download for free.